It was 1984. As I held my newborn son in my arms, I watched for the first time with the world as we saw live footage from Ethiopia. Images of heat-baked earth, swarming flies, parents whose eyes reflected hopelessness, and children with tiny arms and legs so thin they looked like twigs. And my healthy baby boy weighed almost 10 pounds at birth. I thought to myself, if I didn't have a newborn, I would just go, drop everything. Surely there was something I could do, some way I could give. Fast forward 24 years, and I am heading off to Africa on a medical mission to Tanzania. I am terrified. I cry uncontrollably for days. My husband said, "I thought you wanted to go." And I did, and I was afraid. I was afraid of the unknown, the many unknowns, and I was afraid maybe I wouldn't be that person I'd hoped I was back in 1984. Everyone has something to give, whether it's in your school, your church, your neighborhood, your local community. What we often don't realize is that the people who we are giving to also have something to give to us. It might be cultural information, knowledge, perspective, caring, friendship, support. It may seem egotistical to be thinking about what others can give us when we're supposed to be thinking about giving. But if we focus solely on giving, we miss the richness in the opportunity to receive. I'm going to show you a simple model that I've created. I created this after reflecting on the conscious competence theory, which was credited to Noel Birch. The model begins with the unconscious giver. This is a person who's giving out of generosity and kindness. They want to do something good, but they're not conscious of the complexities of the lives of the people that they're giving to. They may be missing information, they may be missing perspective, they may be missing an opportunity to build relationships on trust. Something can happen, an aha moment, when they realize that they're missing information and they begin to ask questions. They may feel unsure of themselves and quite vulnerable at the beginning. It's kind of a scary thing to think that you don't know what you're doing. But as they ask the questions and begin to gather information, they move towards conscious receiving. As the conscious receiver gathers information, learns from the people that they're giving to, they can then take that information that they've learned, and it helps to deepen their understanding of the lives and the experiences of the people that they're working with, and also helps them to understand the effects of their giving. If the conscious receiver can take the new information that they've learned and incorporate it into their thoughts, their behaviors, and their relationships, they move into the place of mindful giving. The new knowledge that they've learned supports and strengthens their mindful giving experience. Since 2008, when I first went to Tanzania on a medical caravan, I have been leading teams of Canadian and Tanzanian doctors, nurses, clinical officers, pharmacists, and logisticians. This dress I'm wearing today was made by my friend Modesta. She's a nurse at the local hospital on Ukerewe Island in the HIV program. Imagine if you were to, 40 of you, were to jump into trucks with your Tanzanian partners, all of your supplies are up on top, you head off down the road, or maybe a path, and you arrive to an open field with an empty barn filled with swooping bats, cats and dogs, and maybe a few chickens. That's where we set up our medical clinics. It might be in a rundown old health center, It might be in a school where the children use rocks for chairs, or it might be in a ramshackle old church where there's no furniture at all. We arrived to crowds of anywhere from 200 to 1,000 people waiting for us. Can you imagine waiting for your doctor appointment for hours in the blistering heat of the sun or torrential downpours? People wait with hungry babies and screaming children. Each day, I go out into the line. It's my responsibility to decide, after we've already seen hundreds of people, to decide how many more people we can see. I take my Tanzanian interpreter out to the line with me, and I decide where we'll cut the line, into those we can see today and those we cannot see. Imagine looking at a young mother and telling her you cannot see her child today. It is crushingly difficult to turn people away. People beg and plead and push children to the front of the line. And I know in those circumstances I would too. One day, Eric, a young Tanzanian translator, came up to me and said, "Could we please see the woman who was kneeling in front of him begging to see the doctor?" He had tears in his eyes as he asked me to make an exception. We saw the woman that day, and I left feeling unsure of myself and ashamed of the situation. I was an unconscious giver. I did not realize I was missing information. Another time, Sonia, a nurse from Collingwood, came up to me and said, "Why were we, the white visitors, making the decision of which patients would be seen here in Tanzania?" A light came on, my aha moment. And as I felt the humiliation of the power of my white skin, I thought to myself, who am I to be making the decision for which patients can be seen? And what information am I using to make those decisions? I had moved to becoming a conscious giver. I realized I was missing information, and I needed to ask questions. It's a short hike from conscious giver to conscious receiver. We begin to ask the questions and gather the information that we need. I met with my Tanzanian coordinator, Nyanda, and we talked about the people in the line. We talked about our process of cutting the line. We talked about the experiences of the people there. It was a giving and receiving process for both of us. And I can tell you today, we no longer cut the line. Tanzanian clinical officers go out into the line and make a quick assessment of each and every person waiting. We do not send anyone away who is seriously ill or in need of immediate medical attention. So I'm able to take that new information that I've learned and this situation that was so difficult for me and that we were able to resolve, and I can take that now into my mindful giving. The model itself is circular, so it's not a thing that we go through once and then we get to be mindful givers. You'll know by now I'm not an expert on mindful giving. In fact, I'm a novice myself. The cycle repeats each time we find ourselves in a giving activity. We may find ourselves unconscious, not even knowing we needed information, or possibly conscious, understanding, hey, there's some information I need here. Either way, we move through asking the questions, gathering the information, and then taking that new knowledge and bringing it into our mindful giving. And each time we go through the cycle, it deepens our experience. I went through the model myself in a brief and somewhat painful way. It was 2 years after we stopped cutting the line in Tanzania, when I traveled to the Democratic Republic of Congo with my friend Heather. There we met with 10 women who told us their stories individually, and there was a thread that ran through each of their stories, connecting them. It was a thread of sexual and physical violence, of displacement from their homes, of hunger, and of despair. When I left the women, I thought to myself, surely there's something I can do, something I can give to make the lives of the women just a little bit better. And so I came home to Canada and I started raising funds to build the Tchukudu Women's Training Center, a center where the women would learn to sew and be able to generate an income for themselves. And yes, I was focused on giving again, but hopefully not quite so unconsciously this time. The next time I visited, I met with a small group of women. We were forming an advisory committee. The women were gathered, and we began to speak through our translator and Congolese coordinator, Kizungu. I was hoping that I could help the women to feel an ownership around the training center, that I could help them to feel empowered to make decisions, because it was their training center, it was not mine. And as we were discussing the criteria for students to come to the training center, we were talking about things like what education would a woman need to attend the training center. One of the women stood up and, speaking for the group, she said to me, "Do women have to be raped to attend the training center?" I was stunned. I didn't understand where the question was coming from. And I had to take a few moments just to sit quietly. And I realized in those moments that when we had talked to those first 10 women, we had focused on their experiences of sexual violence and the horrific experiences that they had. And because of this, all the women believed that this was a criteria for attending the training center. It broke my heart. But my experiences in Tanzania allowed me to move from unconscious giving to conscious giving. And so I asked the question, what do you think we should do? And the women spoke among themselves for a few moments, and then they said, we believe we should welcome all women. And so it was decided. And I took this information and I again moved it into my mindful giving in the hope that I would deepen my experience again. I believe that awareness, the move out of unconsciousness, can and must provoke action. My call to action is simply this. If you find yourself in a giving situation, if you head off in a giving adventure, take some time to think about receiving. Become curious. Ask hard questions. Learn from the people that you are giving to. Find new ways of seeing the world. As mindful givers, we cannot change the whole world, but we can each change our own worlds. And we can invite others who are giving to change their worlds too. And this will have an effect not only on those of us who are giving, but on the people who we are giving to and we are receiving from. In my heart, I know if we can do this, 2050 will indeed see a more caring and mindful world. Thank you for being with me today.